Robert didn't expect anything special that morning in Thompson Park. He was just taking his daily walk when he saw it, a small kitten cornered by an angry Pitbull. Without thinking, he rushed forward to save the frightened creature. His hands were shaking as he scooped up the tiny ball of fur. But the kitten was safe. What Robert didn't know was that this simple act of kindness would change everything. The kitten belonged to Eleanor, the woman who broke his heart 50 years ago, the same woman whose jade bracelet still sat in his dresser drawer, untouched since 1973. Could fate have orchestrated this moment? Or was it just another twist in life's unpredictable path? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Every morning, Robert Maxwell followed the same routine. 6 o'clock sharp, he'd wake to the gentle chime of his bedside clock. No need for an alarm after 40 years of teaching high school English. His body knew the rhythm, even 3 years. Into retirement, the wooden floors creaked beneath his slippered feet as he made his way to the kitchen. 1 cup of black coffee, 2 pieces of whole wheat toast with a thin spread of butter. The morning paper would arrive at 6:30, though these days he found himself spending more time with the crossword than the headlines. This morning, something made him pause at the hallway dresser. Perhaps it was the way the early light caught the brass handles, or maybe it was simply time. The top drawer held what his late wife Mary had called his memory box, a collection of odds and ends he couldn't bear to part with. The leather-bound photo album lay exactly where he'd placed it 5 years ago, after Mary's funeral. He hadn't opened it since then, hadn't needed to. The images were etched in his mind. Eleanor in her yellow sundress at the county fair, her dark hair catching the summer breeze. Eleanor reading poetry under the oak tree in Thompson Park. Eleanor wearing that jade bracelet he'd saved 3 months' allowance to buy. "Robbie?" A voice called from outside, followed by a gentle knock. "Your porch light's still on, Sarah." Chen, his neighbor of 15 years, had taken to checking on him since Mary passed. At 72, Robert appreciated the concern, though he'd never admit it. "Coming, Sarah," he called back, closing the drawer. The album could wait. It had waited 50 years after all. He opened the front door to find Sarah already dressed for her hospital shift, holding a covered dish. "Made too much lasagna again," she said with a knowing smile. At 65, she was the youngest resident on their quiet street and the only one still working full-time. "You're too kind," Robert said, accepting the dish. The lie was comfortable between them. They both knew she made extra portions deliberately, worried about him eating alone. "Any plans for today?" Sarah asked, the question casual but her eyes watchful. Robert gestured to his walking shoes by the door. "The usual morning walk in Thompson Park. Maybe stop by the library later." "Good. Fresh air and books. Keep that mind sharp." She paused, adjusting her nurse's badge. "You know, the senior center's starting a book club next week, Tuesday afternoons." "I'll think about it," Robert said, the same response he'd given to every suggestion since Mary's passing. The truth was, he preferred the quiet. In silence, he could pretend time had stood still, that the world hadn't moved quite so fast, leaving him behind with his memories and morning routines. Sarah nodded, used to his gentle deflections. "Take care, Robbie, and leave your porch light off. No need to waste electricity in broad daylight." After she left, Robert returned to the kitchen, but the rhythm of his morning felt off. The drawer upstairs seemed to call to him, like a radio playing just out of earshot. He thought of the album, of Eleanor's smile frozen in time, of the jade, a bracelet that had once promised a future now long past. His coffee had grown cold. Outside, a school bus rumbled past, collecting children for another day of lessons and possibilities. Robert watched them through his kitchen window, remembering how he used to stand before his classroom, seeing that same limitless potential in young eyes. "Enough," he muttered to himself, rinsing his cup. The past was the past. He had his routine, His crossword puzzles, his daily walk in Thompson Park. It was a good life, if a quiet one. He didn't need the complications of memory, the weight of what-ifs and might-have-beens. He pulled on his walking shoes, checked his pocket for his house key, and stepped out into the morning air. The sun was fully up now, promising another beautiful autumn day in Cedar Grove. As he started his walk toward Thompson Park, he pushed thoughts of the photo album aside. Some memories were better left in their drawers, tucked away with jade bracelets and faded photographs of summer days that had slipped away like water through cupped hands. Thompson Park hadn't changed much in 50 years. The oak trees had grown thicker, their branches reaching further across the winding paths, and the city had added a few modern touches: water fountains, solar-powered lights, wheelchair-accessible benches. But the heart of it remained the same, a green sanctuary in the middle of Cedar Grove, where time seemed to move a little slower. Robert patted his vest pocket, feeling the familiar shape of his father's silver pocket watch. He'd taken to carrying it on his walks, though it hadn't kept proper time in decades. The weight of it was comforting, like holding a piece of history close to his heart. "Time is the most precious gift we have, son," his father had told him, pressing the watch into his hands on his 18th birthday. "Don't waste it waiting for the perfect moment. Perfect moments are made, not found." The irony of that advice wasn't lost on Robert now, as he followed his usual path past the duck pond. How many perfect moments had he let slip away, waiting for some sign that never came? A commotion ahead broke through his reverie. Angry barking echoed across the morning air, followed by the sound of something small and frightened. Robert quickened his pace, his joints protesting the sudden movement. Around the bend, near the old reading alcove, he found the source of the disturbance. A large pitbull, all muscle and focused intensity, had cornered something behind a trash bin. The dog's owner was nowhere in sight. "Hey!" Robert called out, his teacher's voice automatically engaging. "Hey there!" The pitbull barely registered, his presence too intent on its quarry. As Robert drew closer, he heard it. A tiny, desperate mewing. His heart clenched. Without thinking about his arthritis, about his age, about Sarah's constant worries over him doing too much, Robert moved forward. He pulled the silver watch from his pocket, its chain dangling like a makeshift weapon. "Back off now," he commanded, using the stern tone that had cowed generations of unruly teenagers. The pitbull turned slightly, acknowledging him with a low growl. Behind the trash bin, Robert caught a glimpse of silver-grey fur. A kitten, barely old enough to be away from its mother, was pressed against the metal container, trembling. Time seemed to slow. Robert felt the weight of the watch in his hand, heard his father's voice about precious moments, saw the terror in the kitten's eyes. His body moved before his mind could catalogue all the reasons this was a bad idea. He stepped between the pitbull and the bin, making himself as large as possible. The dog, surprised by this new obstacle, backed up slightly. Robert seized the moment, dropping to one knee, his joints screaming in protest, and scooped up the kitten with his free hand. The tiny creature burrowed instantly into his cardigan, seeking warmth and safety. Robert straightened up, his breath coming in short gasps, heart pounding with an intensity he hadn't felt in years. "Duke! Duke, no!" A young woman came running up the path, leash in hand. "Oh God, I'm so sorry! He slipped his collar. I've never seen him do that before." The pitbull, Duke, immediately responded to his owner's voice, the predatory focus, vanishing as he trotted back to her, tail wagging as if nothing had happened. "He's usually so gentle," the woman continued, clipping the leash securely. "I don't know what got into him. Are you all right, sir? Did he hurt the kitten?" Robert's hands were shaking as he cradled the small bundle against his chest. "We're both fine," he managed, though his knee was sending sharp signals of disagreement. "Just scared, I think." The woman secured Duke's collar and moved closer, concern etched on her face. "You're shaking. Please, let me help you to a bench. I feel terrible about this." Robert allowed her to guide him to the nearest bench, his father's watch still clutched in one hand, the kitten purring softly against his sweater. As he sat, a ray of morning sun caught the watch's tarnished surface, and for a moment he could have sworn the hands moved. "I should get you both checked out," the young woman said, pulling out her phone. "There's a vet clinic just 2 blocks from here. I'll pay for everything, of course. It's the least I can do after—" "That won't be necessary," Robert started to say, but the kitten chose that moment to peek out from his cardigan, revealing a small cut above its eye. Well, perhaps a quick check wouldn't hurt. As he followed the apologetic woman and her now docile Pitbull out of the park, Robert slipped the pocket watch back into his vest. His father had been right about perfect moments being made, not found. He just hadn't expected to make one by diving between a Pitbull and a kitten at 72 years old. Cedar Grove Veterinary Clinic occupied a converted Victorian house on Maple Street, its white paint pristine against the backdrop of autumn leaves. Robert sat in the waiting room, the kitten dozing in a borrowed carrier, while Duke and his owner, Amanda, she'd introduced herself as, sorted out the paperwork at the front desk. His knee had begun to stiffen, a reminder that heroics came with a price at his age. Still, the warm weight of the carrier on his lap made the discomfort worthwhile. The kitten had stopped trembling, though it still pressed close to the side of the carrier nearest to him. The waiting room walls were covered with pet photos and educational posters, but it was the community bulletin board that caught Robert's eye. Specifically, a yellowed newspaper clipping framed near the bottom, Cedar Grove Gazette, June 1973. He didn't need to read it to know what it said. He'd memorized those words decades ago. "Local beauty queen to wed business heir," the headline announced. Below it, a photo of Eleanor in her graduation gown, accepting her teaching degree, alongside the announcement of her engagement to James Harrison III, of the Harrison manufacturing fortune. Robert shifted in his seat, trying to look away from the clipping, but his eyes kept returning to Eleanor's smile. It wasn't her real smile. He knew the difference. This was her public smile, the one she wore like armor at formal events. Her real smile had always been slightly crooked, with a dimple appearing only on the left side. "Mr. Maxwell?" A young veterinary technician appeared with a clipboard. "We can see you and your little friend now." "Oh, he's not mine," Robert started to explain, but Amanda cut in from the desk. "Please, take him in first. I'll finish up the paperwork and payment." Arrangements. The examination room was warm and bright, with morning sun streaming through large windows. The tech, her name tag read Jenny, gently lifted the kitten from the carrier, speaking in soft, soothing tones. "What a brave little one you are," she cooed, examining the cut above its eye. "This looks superficial, but the doctor will want to check for any other injuries. Has he eaten anything since the incident?" "I'm not sure," Robert admitted. "Everything happened rather quickly." The door opened, and Robert heard a voice that made his heart skip a beat. "Jenny, could you grab the new batch of antibiotics from the—" "Oh." He turned slowly, his father's watch suddenly heavy in his vest pocket. The woman in the doorway wore a white lab coat, her silver hair swept back in a neat bun. Reading glasses hung from a chain around her neck, but her eyes, those eyes hadn't changed in 50 years. Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, like a thread from 1973 to now, delicate and dangerous to break. The kitten mewed softly, drawing their attention back to the present. "Dr. Chen will take good care of you both," Jenny said brightly, clearly missing the weight of the moment. "She's the best vet in Cedar Grove." Eleanor, Dr. Chen, moved forward with professional composure, though Robert noticed her hands trembling slightly as she pulled on latex gloves. "What happened here?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Robert explained about the Pitbull, leaving out his own role as much as possible. But Jenny, reading from Amanda's hastily scribbled note, filled in the gaps. "It says here you jumped between them," she said admiringly. "Not many people would do that, especially—" She trailed off, perhaps realizing it wasn't polite to mention his age. "Especially at 72, Robert finished with a small smile. "Yes, well, I wasn't thinking very clearly at the moment. He saw Eleanor's hands pause in their examination of the kitten. She'd be 70 now, he realized, the same age he'd been when Mary passed away. The cut's not deep, Eleanor said finally, her professional mask firmly in place. He'll need antibiotics and a tetanus shot as a precaution. Jenny, could you? Right away, Dr. Chen. The tech hurried out, leaving them alone with the kitten and decades of unspoken words. Eleanor removed her gloves with deliberate care. You could have been killed, she said quietly. Yes. That would have been a terrible way to find out you. We're back in Cedar Grove. I never left. Their eyes met again, and this time Robert saw the left dimple appear briefly before she looked away. The examination room filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the kitten's soft purring. Eleanor reached for her reading glasses, the chain clinking gently against the buttons of her lab coat. Her hands hesitated before putting them on, as if the act of seeing Robert more clearly might make him disappear. I read about Mary, she said finally, adjusting the glasses. 3 years ago, I wanted to send a card, but it had been 50 years, Robert finished. The kitten nudged his hand, demanding attention. I understand. Eleanor's glasses. You caught the morning light, creating a brief glare that masked her eyes. When she moved, Robert saw they were moist. You haven't changed as much as I expected, she said, still rushing in to save the day. Oh, I've changed, Robert replied, running a hand through his white hair. Just ask my knee. It's filing a formal complaint as we speak. That earned him a small laugh, startling them both with its familiarity. How many times had he made her laugh like that under the oak trees in Thompson Park? I suppose we both have, Eleanor said, touching her own silver hair self-consciously. She removed her glasses, folding and unfolding them in a nervous gesture. Life has a way of... Dr. Chen, Jenny's voice crackled over the intercom. Your 9:30 is here. Should I reschedule? Eleanor pressed the intercom button. No, that's fine. I'm almost finished here. She turned back to Robert. The kitten will need antibiotics twice daily for a week, and someone will need to monitor that cut. I can bring him back, Robert offered, then caught himself. Unless he belongs to someone. I didn't even think to check for a collar. Eleanor's hands stilled on her glasses. Actually, she paused, then continued with professional detachment. He's one of our rescue cases. Been here 3 days. No chip, no collar. The kitten had curled up in Robert's lap, completely at ease. Eleanor watched them for a moment, then slipped her glasses back on, all business again. The adoption fee is $200, she said, writing in the medical chart, including initial shots and neutering when he's old enough. Unless you're not interested in, I'll take him, Robert said quickly. Too quickly, perhaps, but the warmth of the small creature against his leg felt right somehow. Eleanor nodded, still not meeting his eyes. She wrote something else in the chart, then finally looked up. Through her glasses, her gaze was both professional. And something else, something that reminded Robert of summer evenings and poetry readings and a jade bracelet carefully chosen from a store window. You'll need to fill out some paperwork, she said softly. Would you? Would you like some coffee while you wait? The machine in the lobby is terrible, but there's a decent pot in my office. Before Robert could answer, Jenny returned with the antibiotics and paperwork. The moment shifted, reality reasserting itself with forms to sign and instructions to follow. Twice daily, Eleanor repeated, handing him the medicine. And watch for any signs of infection. She hesitated, then added, My direct line is on the prescription label, in case you have any concerns. Robert nodded, carefully placing the medicine in his pocket next to his father's watch. Thank you, Dr. Chen. Eleanor, she corrected, removing her glasses again. Without them, her eyes seemed younger somehow, more like the girl who used to read Wordsworth under oak trees. After saving my rescue kitten from a Pitbull, I think you've earned the right to use my first name. As Robert gathered the carrier and paperwork, he caught a glimpse of their reflection in the window. 2 silver-haired strangers connected by a small grey kitten and memories that had gathered dust like old books on forgotten shelves. About that coffee, he started. The intercom crackled again. Dr. Chen, your 9:30 is getting anxious. Eleanor sighed, slipping her glasses back on. The professional mask returned, but her smile had that familiar left dimple. Another time? I'm here every day, and he'll need a checkup next week. Another time, Robert agreed, finding himself smiling too. We have a lot of those to make up for. A week passed like a page turning in an old book. Robert settled into a new routine, morning medications for both himself and the kitten, whom he'd named Wordsworth, or Worth for short, followed by his usual walk to Thompson Park, now with a few extra stops to check on his furry companion. The follow-up appointment arrived sooner than he expected. This time, when Eleanor suggested coffee after Worth's checkup, there were no interruptions. I know a place, she said, slipping off her lab coat, if you don't mind a short walk. The Bell Tower Cafe sat exactly where it had 50 years ago, its red brick exterior weathered but sturdy. The bell-shaped sign still hung over the door, though the gold paint had faded to a gentle patina. They haven't changed the menu since 1970, Eleanor said, as they settled into a corner booth. The leather seats were cracked but clean, worn smooth by decades of conversations. Robert picked up the laminated menu, its corners soft with age. The prices had been updated with small stickers, but the items remained the same. Egg creams, club sandwiches, and their famous cherry pie. Do you remember? They both started at the same time, then laughed. Ladies first, Robert said, falling easily into old habits. Eleanor smoothed her napkin, a gesture he remembered from countless study dates. Do you remember that rainy Tuesday when we split the last piece of cherry pie? You had that big literature exam the next day. Wordsworth and Coleridge? Robert nodded. You quizzed me for hours. I passed with the highest grade in the class. Because you worked hard, Eleanor said, then added with a small smile, and because you actually read the poems, unlike half your classmates. The waitress appeared, a young woman with bright blue hair and kind eyes. What can I get you folks? 2 coffees, Eleanor said. And 1 slice of cherry pie, Robert finished, with 2 forks, please. When the waitress left, a comfortable silence settled between them. Outside, cedar trees swayed in the autumn breeze, their shadows dancing on the cafe's worn tile floor. I've thought about this place often, Eleanor admitted, running her finger along the menu's edge. Especially the morning I left for Harrison University. I almost came in, almost ordered our usual. I was here, Robert said quietly, every morning that week, hoping. Eleanor's hand stilled on the menu. My father, you don't have. To explain. Yes, I do. She looked up, meeting his eyes. You deserve to know. That summer, when Harrison Manufacturing was about to go under, my father made a deal with James Harrison II. The company would survive. Hundreds would keep their jobs, but there was a condition. The waitress returned with their coffee and pie. They waited until she moved away before continuing. A merger, Robert said, realization dawning. Through marriage. Eleanor nodded, her coffee untouched. Father said it was my duty. The whole town depended on the factory. 3,000 jobs, 3,000 families. How could I say no? You couldn't, Robert said gently. That's who you've always been, Eleanor. Putting others first. She blinked, rapidly reaching for her coffee. I wrote you letters, dozens of them, but Father, he said it would be kinder to make a clean break. I wrote too, Robert admitted. Mary used to tease me about my box of unsent letters. She understood, you know, about first loves. Tell me about her? Eleanor asked softly. I only knew her. From the local papers, the charity events she organized. Robert smiled, remembering. She was kind, strong, never tried to compete with a memory. We had 30 good years, raised our daughter Sarah. She made me laugh again. I'm glad, Eleanor said, and he could hear the genuine warmth in her voice. James was a good man in his way, devoted to the company, to maintaining his father's legacy. We had twin boys. They run the business now. And you became a veterinarian, eventually, after James passed 15 years ago. It's never too late to follow your dreams, right? She gestured to their surroundings. Though some dreams stay the same. Robert picked up his fork, cutting into the cherry pie. It tasted exactly as he remembered. Some things shouldn't change. No, Eleanor agreed, picking up her own fork. Some things are perfect just as they are. Through the cafe window, they could see Thompson Park in the distance, the oak trees wearing their autumn colors like evening gowns. The menu between them held not just lunch options, but memories preserved like pressed flowers between pages. Young, love, hard choices, and the bittersweet taste of what might have been. The following Sunday, Eleanor invited Robert to her home, a modest craftsman house on the outskirts of Cedar Grove. Worth the kitten came along, his cut now healed to a thin silver line above his eye. "Tea?" Eleanor asked, leading them into a sunny study lined with bookshelves. Medical texts shared space with worn poetry volumes, a lifetime of interests merged on wooden shelves. "Please," Robert said, settling into a leather armchair. Worth immediately claimed his lap, purring contentedly. Eleanor disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a tray and a weathered manila envelope. "I found something yesterday going through my father's things." She set the tray down, her hands lingering on the envelope, his will and other documents. She poured the tea with practiced grace, but Robert could see tension in her shoulders. "You don't have to share this," he said gently. "Yes, I do." She handed him a cup, then opened the envelope. Because it wasn't just about the marriage arrangement. There was more, so much more that even I didn't know until now. From the envelope, she withdrew a stack of papers. On top was a letter, the paper yellow with age, dated June 15th, 1973. "My father wrote this the day before he told me about the Harrison arrangement." Eleanor's voice wavered slightly. "It was supposed to be delivered to me after his death, but somehow it got mixed in with legal documents." She unfolded the letter, her reading glasses forgotten on their chain. "My dearest Eleanor," she began, then paused, gathering strength. "What I am about to do will hurt you deeply, and for that I will never forgive myself. But you must understand, the choice I make today is not just about the factory or the Harrisons." Robert set his tea aside, listening intently. Worth sensed the mood, curling closer against him. "Robert Maxwell's father, George, came to me last week," Eleanor continued reading. "He knows about the factory's troubles, about the deal with Harrison. He offered his life savings, everything he had set aside for Robert's education, to help save the company." Robert's breath caught. He remembered that summer his father had suddenly insisted he apply for student loans, claiming the college fund had been lost in bad investments. "I couldn't take it," Eleanor read, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just because it wouldn't have been enough, but because I knew what it would do to both of you. Robert would have given up his dreams of teaching to work in the factory. You would have spent your life feeling responsible for his sacrifice." She pulled out another document, a bank statement from 1973. "Father took the deal with the Harrisons, not just to save the factory, but to ensure your father's savings stayed intact, to protect your future. All these years," Robert said softly, "I thought my father had gambled away my college fund. I was angry at first, but he seemed so devastated that I never brought it up again. There's more." Eleanor's hands trembled as she drew out a bundle of unopened letters, held together with a faded rubber band. "He kept them, every letter you wrote to me that summer, and," she pulled out another bundle, "every letter I wrote to you." Robert stared at the letters, dozens of them, their envelopes still sealed, their words trapped in time like insects in amber. "He intercepted them? To make the break cleaner?" Eleanor nodded. He thought if we kept communicating, we'd find a way to be together, and then both families would suffer. Your future would be lost, and the factory workers would lose everything." Worth stirred in Robert's lap, stretching before settling again. The simple movement grounded them in the present, even as the past swirled around them like autumn leaves in a storm. "He was trying to protect everyone," Robert said finally. "Your father, my father, they both thought they were doing the right thing." "They were," Eleanor agreed softly. but knowing that doesn't change how much it hurt. She gathered the letters, holding them out to Robert. "These belong to you as much as they belong to me. Should we read them together?" Robert finished, a lifetime of unspoken words hanging between them. Eleanor nodded. That familiar left, dimple appearing. After 50 years, maybe it's time we both knew what we wanted to say. Outside, a breeze stirred the cedar trees, their branches casting shifting shadows across the study floor. The past, preserved in ink and paper, waited to be discovered, like a time capsule finally unearthed. Reading 50-year-old letters together proved more exhausting than either of them had anticipated. After an hour, Eleanor set aside the bundle, rubbing her eyes. "Perhaps we should take a break," she suggested, noticing Robert's slight wince as he shifted in his chair. "Besides, it's time for your medication, isn't it?" Robert checked his watch. His father's pocket watch now kept company with an array of orange prescription bottles in his vest pocket. "You remember my schedule?" "I am a doctor," she reminded him with a gentle smile. "And you mentioned the heart medication at Worth's last checkup." He pulled out the bottle labeled metoprolol, "Take twice daily with food." The pills rattled softly, a subtle reminder of mortality. "Mary used to set alarms on her phone for these. Now Sarah texts me twice a day to make sure I haven't forgotten." "My boys do the same," Eleanor said, heading to the kitchen. She returned with a small plate of crackers. Daniel even installed one of those smart home systems that announces medication times. "I unplugged it after 2 days. Felt like living with a very bossy ghost," Robert chuckled, accepting the crackers. "Sarah's been hinting about getting me one of those medical alert necklaces. You know, I've fallen and I can't get up. And have you?" "Fallen? No, but some mornings—" He swallowed the pill, then met her eyes. "Some mornings I feel every one of my 72 years." Eleanor settled back into her chair, Worth immediately abandoning Robert to curl up in her lap. "James had heart problems too at the end. I learned every medication, every possible side effect, still couldn't stop." She trailed off, absently stroking the kitten. "You became a vet after he passed," Robert said softly. She nodded. "I was 65. Everyone said I was crazy to start veterinary school at that age. But after spending 15 years watching someone's health decline, being able to help heal others, even if they're four-legged, it gave me purpose again. You always wanted to work with animals. I remember that essay you wrote in Peterson's English class about opening an animal sanctuary. You remember that?" "I remember everything. About you, Eleanor." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with half a century of meaning. Worth yawned, oblivious to the tension, and batted playfully at Eleanor's reading glasses chain. "Robert," she began carefully, "what are we doing?" He looked down at the scattered letters, their yellowed envelopes telling stories of what might have been. "I don't know. At our age, should we even be asking that question?" "Our age," Eleanor repeated with a slight laugh. "I have arthritis in my hands. Some mornings I can barely hold a scalpel. You have a heart condition. We take enough medications between us to stock a small pharmacy. And yet here we are," Robert said, "reading love letters we wrote when the world was young." Eleanor's hand strayed to her own prescription bottle on the side table. Calcium supplements and blood pressure medication nestled together like old friends. "I'm not the same girl who wrote those letters. And you're not the same boy who received them." "No," Robert agreed. "We're not, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Those kids didn't know what they know now. About love, about loss, about how precious time really is." Worth chose that moment to leap down, padding over to Robert's discarded pill bottle and sniffing it curiously. Eleanor quickly scooped him up, but not before they both broke into laughter at the kitten's pharmaceutical interests. "Well," Eleanor said, still smiling, "at least we have a furry pharmacy inspector to keep us honest about our medications." Robert watched her with the kitten, saw how naturally they fit together. Eleanor, Worth, this moment. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "Sarah's been after me to get one of those pill organizer systems, the kind that helps you keep track of weekly medications." The ones with the little compartments. Yes. I don't suppose... I mean, if you're free next Saturday. They have a demonstration at the pharmacy on Oak Street. Eleanor's left dimple appeared. Are you asking me on a date to learn about pill organizers, Robert Maxwell? I suppose I am. Romantic, isn't it? Nothing says courtship like comparing medication schedules. Actually, she said softly, at our age it might be the most romantic thing of all. The pharmacy's pill organizer demonstration turned into lunch at Bell Tower Cafe, which led to an afternoon at Thompson Park. By the time they reached the veterinary clinic Monday morning for Worth's scheduled checkup, Robert and Eleanor had spent more time together in 2 days than they had in 50 years. His weight's improved, Eleanor said professionally, though her eyes sparkled as Worth played with her stethoscope. You're doing a wonderful job with him, Robert. We're doing a wonderful job, he corrected. He's been using that fancy scratching post you got him more than my armchair lately. Eleanor began filling out the official adoption papers, her pen moving efficiently across the forms. Then she paused, tapping the section marked Primary Residence. About that, she said carefully, I've been thinking. Worth seems to love both our homes, and since I'm at the clinic all day. Are you suggesting a shared custody arrangement, Dr. Chen? She smiled at his teasing tone. Actually, yes. He could stay with you during the day, then with me in the evenings when I can properly monitor his health, and on weekends. We could figure it out together, Robert finished. The words held more meaning than just kitten care arrangements. Eleanor pulled out a fresh adoption form. We'd both need to sign as co-owners. It's a bit unusual, but since I'm the veterinarian of record, you can make it work? Robert's eyes crinkled with amusement. Bending the rules a bit, are we? Let's call it a creative interpretation of standard procedures. She began filling out the new form. Besides, Worth has already decided he belongs to both of us. We're just making it official. Robert watched her precise handwriting filling. The spaces, both their names, both their addresses, shared responsibilities laid out in black and white. Such a simple thing, this piece of paper, yet it felt momentous. You know what this means, he said solemnly. We'll need to coordinate schedules, share updates, maybe even have regular meetings to discuss his care. Over coffee, Eleanor suggested, innocently not looking up from the form. Or dinner? Robert held his breath slightly, feeling like a teenager again despite his white hair and medication schedule. Now she did look up, her reading glasses slipping down her nose. Dinner would be nice. Worth should have both his humans together, regularly, for his emotional well-being, of course. Of course, purely therapeutic reasons. Worth, as if understanding he was the topic of discussion, batted playfully at Eleanor's pen as she tried to finish the form. She laughed, and the sound filled the examination room with warmth. You little troublemaker, she scolded fondly, rescuing the papers from tiny paw prints. Just like someone else I used to know who never could sit still during study sessions. I seem to recall someone who was easily distracted by poetry readings, Robert countered. They shared a smile, remembering those long-ago afternoons. Then Eleanor straightened, becoming Dr. Chen again, as she dated and signed the forms. We'll need witnesses, she said. Jenny can sign, and a knock at the door interrupted her. Sarah Chen stood in the doorway holding a folder. Mom, the lab results you wanted? She trailed off, taking in the scene. Her mother, Robert, the kitten, and the adoption papers. Sarah, Eleanor said warmly, perfect timing. We need another witness for these forms. Robert and I are going to co-parent Worth. Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly, but she stepped forward, accepting the pen. Co-parent? The kitten? He needs both of us, Robert explained, watching Sarah's expression carefully. We thought this arrangement would be best for everyone. Sarah signed where Eleanor indicated, then looked between them with barely concealed amusement. The kitten needs both of you, right? And the dinner reservations I saw on Mom's desk calendar for Friday night, those are for Worth's nutritional planning? Eleanor blushed slightly, but met her daughter's gaze steadily. Actually, we're discussing pill organizers. Very important medical equipment. Sarah handed back the pen, her smile warm. Well, As long as Worth approves, who am I to argue? Worth chose that moment to curl up in Eleanor's lap while reaching out a paw to pat Robert's hand. A perfect picture of feline diplomacy. I'd say, "That's settled then," Robert said softly, his hand finding Eleanor's as they both signed the final line of the adoption papers. Their fingers touched briefly, and 50 years faded into a moment of shared possibility. Robert stared at his phone's screen, still adjusting to the group text Sarah had set up. She'd named it Worth's Extended Family, and the notifications hadn't stopped buzzing since morning. "Sarah Maxwell, Dad, you need to turn your receipts on, so we know you've seen the messages." Daniel Chen, "Mom, same for you, and please stop typing when you're thinking. It makes us think you're having a medical emergency." Eleanor, "Sorry dear, still learning." Thomas Chen, "Speaking of learning, who taught Mom to use emojis?" Eleanor, "Robert, is this better? I found the settings." Sarah mentioned, Sarah Maxwell, "Much better. Now about Sunday dinner." Robert smiled, remembering how Mary used to handle all the family communication. Now here he was, navigating group chats and emoji responses like a teenager. His phone buzzed again. "Sarah Maxwell, everyone, my place, 6 p.m. Sunday. No excuses. Worth's first official family dinner with all his humans." Thomas Chen, "Wait, are we really organizing a family dinner because of a cat?" Daniel Chen, "Have you met our mother?" "Of course we are." Eleanor, "Worth is a very special cat." "Right, Robert?" Robert, "Indeed he is." A private message popped up from his daughter. "Dad, you're smiling at your phone. I can tell even through text." "My daughter knows me too well," Robert murmured to Worth, who was sprawled across his desk, batting at his reading glasses. The group chat continued to buzz. Thomas Chen, "Should we be concerned that our 70-year-old parents are sharing custody of a cat?" Daniel Chen, "Better than them sharing custody of our childhood hamster photos." Eleanor, "Speaking of photos." Eleanor, image. Young Robert and Eleanor at Cedar Grove Fair, 1973. Sarah Maxwell, "Mom!" "Where did you find that, Eleanor?" "Your father's sister Amy sent it. Apparently she kept everything." Robert, "I remember that day. You won the poetry recitation contest." Thomas Chen, "Wait, that's why you named the cat Wordsworth?" Daniel Chen, "I can't believe our mother's first love was an English teacher. Suddenly, her romance novel collection makes sense." Eleanor, "Boys!" Sarah Maxwell, "Actually, it's really sweet. And Worth definitely needs both of them." "Right, Dad." Robert's fingers hovered over the keyboard. How to explain that Worth wasn't just a cat, but a bridge between past and present, a reason to rebuild what time had worn away. Robert, "Worth knows what he needs. We're just following his lead." Eleanor, Thomas Chen, "Did Mom just send a heart emoji?" Daniel Chen, "That's it. Family dinner is definitely happening. I need to see this in person." Sarah Maxwell, "Already planned. I'm making Grandma Chen's dumplings." Eleanor, "I'll bring cherry pie from Bell Tower." Robert, "Some things never change." Thomas Chen, "Okay, the pie I understand, but why is Dad sending cryptic messages about the past?" Sarah Maxwell, "Long story. Sunday dinner will explain everything." Daniel Chen, "Now I'm really intrigued." Eleanor, "Robert, should we tell them about the letters?" Robert, "Let's save something for dinner." Sarah Maxwell, "Dad just used an emoji." But Thomas Daniel, "Your move on the family betting pool." Robert set his phone down, chuckling. Worth stretched and moved to his lap, purring contentedly. The afternoon sun painted shadows across his desk, where the adoption papers sat beside a stack of 50-year-old letters, past and present, mingling like old friends. His phone buzzed one more time, a private message from Eleanor. "Scary, isn't it? All of them together watching us find our way back." He typed carefully, each word chosen with the precision he once used for poetry. Not scary, right. Like, worth finding exactly the home he needed, even if it took a dramatic rescue to get there. 3 dots appeared as Eleanor typed, disappeared, then appeared again. Bell Tower tomorrow, before we face the Inquisition on Sunday? Wouldn't miss it. Worth needs his morning checkup anyway. Of course. Purely professional reasons. Absolutely. Medical necessity. A moment later, the group chat exploded. Thomas, Chen. Both of them are using emojis now. Daniel. Chen. That's it. I'm coming to dinner early. This I have to see. Sarah Maxwell. Too late, I already called. Dibs on helping set up. Eleanor. We can hear you all plotting, you know. Robert. Let them plot. We have Worth on our side. Sarah Maxwell. Oh my God, they're doing it in the group chat now. Thomas Chen. Doing what? Sarah Maxwell. Being adorable. Mum. Dad, we love you both, but please take this to private messages. Eleanor. Sorry, dear. Robert, check your texts in a minute. Worth needs to discuss his weekend schedule. Daniel Chen. Worth needs to discuss. Thomas Chen. Let them be. I haven't seen Mom use this many emojis since ever. Robert smiled at his phone one last time before setting it aside. Worth yawned and stretched, then settled more comfortably into his lap. Through the window, he could see the branches of an old oak tree swaying in the breeze, its leaves turning golden in the autumn light. Something's changed. Technology, communication, family dynamics. But some things, like the way his heart lifted at Eleanor's messages, remained surprisingly, wonderfully the same. The afternoon before the family dinner, Robert and Eleanor walked down Cedar Grove's main street, Worth secure in his new carrier. They'd just finished lunch at Bell Tower when Eleanor suddenly stopped, her hand touching Robert's arm. Look, she said softly, pointing to a faded poster in a shop window. Macmillan's Dance Studio. The vintage flyer, yellowed but still visible behind glass, announced Summer Dance Series 1973, every Friday night. The image showed young couples dancing, their illustrated faces frozen in perpetual joy. It's still here, Robert said, surprised. The studio's windows were dark now, but the Art Deco facade remained unchanged, its brass door handle worn smooth by decades of eager hands. Sarah teaches yoga here now, Eleanor said. They converted it 5 years ago, but they kept all the original fixtures, even the mirrors. She hesitated, then added, Would you like to see? Robert glanced at his watch, his father's silver pocket watch, not the digital one Sarah had given him for medication reminders. Do you have a key? Better. Eleanor smiled, pulling out her phone. A few taps later, she said, Sarah says she's finishing a class. She'll let us in. They waited on the sidewalk, Worth watching the world through his carrier mesh. A few minutes later, Sarah appeared at the door, yoga mat under her arm, her face flushed from teaching. Mom, I didn't expect... Oh, her eyes widened as she saw Robert. Oh, now I understand. Come in, both of you. The studio smelled of essential oils and new wooden floors, but underneath lay the familiar scent of history. The original hardwood still, peeked through in places, showing wear marks where countless feet had turned and stepped. I have 20 minutes before my next class, Sarah said, propping the door open. Make yourselves at home. As Sarah disappeared into the back office, Eleanor set Worth's carrier down and walked to the center of the room. The afternoon sun streamed through high windows, casting long rectangles of light across the floor, just as it had 50 years ago. Remember that summer? Robert asked, joining her. Every Friday night. You were terrible at the foxtrot, Eleanor laughed. But you never gave up. I had a good reason to keep trying. He held out his hand, arthritis-twisted fingers open in invitation. Shall we see if I've improved? Eleanor's eyes softened. Robert, our dancing days are not over, he finished. Just different. He gestured to his heart, where the medication kept steady time. We'll take it slow. She slipped her hand into his, and they began to sway gently. No music played except in memory, but they didn't need it. Their feet remembered the rhythm, even if their bodies couldn't quite match it anymore. No spins. Eleanor warned, her free hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Doctor's orders. Whose? Yours or my cardiologist's? Both. And Worth's too, I imagine. From his carrier, Worth watched them with feline curiosity, his tail twitching to their movement. They managed a careful box step, their shadows mingling with the sunshine on the floor. Robert's knee protested, and Eleanor's breath came a bit shorter, but neither stopped. "We used to dance for hours," Eleanor murmured. "Now look at us, counting. Our steps like beginners again." "Maybe that's not so bad," Robert said. "Starting over, learning new ways to move together." A floorboard creaked, the same one that had announced the dance instructor's approach so many years ago. They turned to see Sarah in the doorway, phone held discreetly at her side. "Don't mind me," she said softly, "but the family group chat might want to see this." "Sarah Chen," Eleanor protested, but she was smiling. "You're as bad as your brothers. Worse," Sarah agreed cheerfully. "I'm the one who started the betting pool on when you two would dance again." Robert and Eleanor shared a look, then continued their gentle swaying. Let the children have their fun. Some moments belong to the past, but this one, this careful dance between memory and possibility, was entirely new. "You know," Robert said as they made another slow turn, "I never did master that foxtrot." Eleanor's left dimple appeared. "Well, the studio's free on Tuesday mornings. Sarah teaches chair yoga, but after that—" "Are you suggesting dance lessons, Dr. Chen?" "Physical therapy," she corrected primly. "For flexibility and balance, very important at our age." From his carrier, Worth meowed his apparent approval, and they all laughed, even Sarah, who was definitely still filming. The sun continued its slow dance across the floor, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. Outside, cedar. Grove went about its business, but in this room, time moved to a different rhythm, one measured not in years or regrets, but in gentle steps forward, together. The Tuesday morning dance lesson never happened. Instead, Robert woke to an unfamiliar pressure in his chest and a dizziness that had nothing to do with romance. Worth, sleeping on the pillow beside him, was the first to notice something wrong. The kitten's persistent meowing woke Sarah Chen next door. She found Robert sitting on the edge of his bed, pale and short of breath, his father's pocket watch clutched tightly in one hand. "Just indigestion," he insisted, even as Sarah called the ambulance. "Probably that new curry sauce from dinner." But Sarah had been a nurse too long to mistake the signs. Within 20 minutes, Robert found himself in the emergency room, a plastic hospital bracelet being fastened around his wrist. "Maxwell, Robert, 72, cardiac observation." "I've called everyone," Sarah said, holding his hand. "Mom's on her way. Thomas and Daniel, too." "You shouldn't have bothered them," Robert protested weakly. "It's nothing serious." "Robert Maxwell," Eleanor's voice came from the doorway. "Don't you dare tell a doctor what is and isn't serious." She stood there in her veterinary scrubs, reading glasses hanging forgotten around her neck, her silver hair escaping its usual neat bun. She must have come straight from the clinic. "I'm fine," Robert said automatically, then saw the fear behind her professional mask. "Eleanor," she moved to his bedside, taking his other hand. Her fingers found his pulse, a habit of decades. "In medicine, your daughter called me," said Worth, raised the alarm. "Traitor," Robert muttered, but squeezed her hand. "He's with you?" "Jenny's watching him at the clinic. He tried to follow me out the door." She touched the hospital bracelet, reading the details. What happened? Before Robert could minimize the situation again, Dr. Harris entered with his test results. The younger doctor's serious expression silenced any attempt at deflection. "Mr. Maxwell," he began, then noticed Eleanor's professional stance. "Are you family?" "She's my—" Robert paused. What were they to each other now? First loves, co-parents of a rescue kitten, second chances personified. "I'm his doctor," Eleanor said firmly. "Well, his cat's doctor, and—" "She should hear this," Robert finished. Dr. Harris nodded. "The good news is we caught it early. The bad news is you've had a mild cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but a warning sign we need to take seriously." The room filled with medical Terminology, adjusted medications, lifestyle changes, follow-up appointments. Robert watched the hospital bracelet shift on his wrist as Eleanor took notes, her doctor's handwriting clear and precise. "I'll update your charts," Dr. Harris concluded. "We'll want to keep you overnight for observation." After he left, Eleanor turned to Sarah. "Could you call your brothers? Let them know they don't need to rush over?" Once Sarah stepped out, Eleanor finally let her professional demeanor crack. "You scared me," she whispered. When Sarah called, "I'm sorry," Robert said. "I didn't want to worry anyone." "That's not how this works." She touched his hospital bracelet again. "Not anymore. You don't get to face these things alone." A memory surfaced. Eleanor at 17, declaring she wanted to be a doctor. He'd believed in her dream then, even when others said it wasn't proper for a young lady of her background. "Dr. Chen," he said softly, "are you telling me I need a full-time medical supervisor?" "I'm telling you," she replied. That familiar, left dimple appearing despite her worry, that Worth needs both his humans healthy. "And I need—" She paused, blinking rapidly. "I need more time. We've already lost 50 years. The hospital bracelet caught the fluorescent light, its stark white plastic a reminder of mortality. But Eleanor's hand was warm in his. And through the window, he could see cedar trees swaying in the autumn wind, still dancing despite their age. "Well," Robert said carefully, "I suppose we'll have to cancel that dance lesson." "Postpone," Eleanor corrected, "and maybe start with something gentler, walking in Thompson Park, for instance. With medical supervision. With me," she said simply. "And Worth, of course. He's quite invested in your recovery." Sarah returned, phone in hand. "The boys send their love, Mom, and Daniel says—" She stopped, seeing their clasped hands, the way they leaned toward each other like flowers following the sun. "I'll tell them later." The hospital bracelet rustled as Robert shifted, making room for Eleanor to sit on the edge of his bed. Outside his room, monitors beeped and nurses hurried past, but in here, time moved to the rhythm of second chances. "You know," he said, "I never did read you that Wordsworth poem properly, the one from the poetry contest." Eleanor smiled, settling beside him. "We have all night, and tomorrow, and after that." She touched the hospital bracelet one more time. "Well, that's up to you, and your doctors, all of us." A week after Robert's release from the hospital, Eleanor arrived at his house, carrying Worth and a thick folder of real estate listings. Sarah had been staying with Robert since his discharge, but they all knew she'd need to return to her own life eventually. "Before you say anything," Eleanor began, setting Worth down in his favorite sunny spot, "this isn't about romance. It's about practicality." Robert looked up from his crossword puzzle, reading glasses perched on his nose. "Ah, so these aren't lovingly circled potential dream homes. They're options," she said, spreading the listings across his coffee table. "Senior living communities primarily, places with medical staff on call, but independent living arrangements." Worth padded across the papers, settling on a photo of Cedar Grove Gardens, a new development on the edge of town. Robert picked up the brochure, noting Eleanor's neat annotations in the margins. "Two-bedroom units available," he read. "Separate offices, shared common areas. You've thought this through." "I'm a doctor, Robert. Thinking things through is what I do." She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "After James, I promised myself I'd be practical about aging, about not being alone." Robert set down the brochure, watching Worth investigate the other listings. "And this has nothing to do with my dramatic midnight ambulance ride. It has everything to do with it." Eleanor's voice was soft but firm. "Sarah can't stay forever. Your house has stairs. Mine has that treacherous garden path. We're both too proud to move in with our children, and Worth is tired of commuting between homes." At the sound of his name, Worth looked up, then deliberately sat on a listing featuring a ground-floor apartment with the enclosed patio. "Even the cat's making decisions now." Robert chuckled. "He's very opinionated." Eleanor pulled out another brochure. "This one has a community center with a dance floor. For physical therapy, of course." "Of course," Robert's eyes crinkled. And the one next to it? With the library? Book club meetings, very important for cognitive health. They sat in comfortable silence, looking through the listings. Each one represented a different possible future, a way to move forward together without rushing, without denying their age or circumstances. Mary and I talked about downsizing, Robert said finally. Near the end, she knew Sarah worried about me alone in this house. Eleanor touched his hand gently. James and I never got the chance to plan. His heart attack was so sudden. Afterward, I threw myself into veterinary school, partly to avoid making these kinds of decisions. And now I'm trying to be braver, smarter. She smiled slightly. Having a very determined cat and a somewhat reckless English teacher in my life helps. Worth chose that moment to knock several listings to the floor, leaving only the Cedar Grove Gardens brochure prominently displayed. Subtle, isn't he? Robert said, but he picked up the brochure again. The development was close to both the veterinary clinic and Thompson Park. The units had emergency call buttons, but also private gardens. Independence with a safety net. We could look, Eleanor suggested carefully. Just look. No pressure, no commitments. Worth could help us evaluate the sunlight angles for his napping requirements. Robert thought about his current house, full of memories but also echoing with silence. He thought about Eleanor's home, her boys worried about her being alone. Then he thought about that hospital bracelet, still sitting in his bedside drawer, a reminder that time was precious. Sarah will say we're moving too fast, he mused. Sarah's the one who gave me these listings, Eleanor countered. Our children worry, Robert, more than they let on. Worth jumped into Robert's lap, purring loudly. Through the window, they could see Sarah's house next door, where she'd been watching over him all week. Just looking, he confirmed. Eleanor nodded. Just looking, though. She hesitated. Cedar Grove Gardens is having an open house this weekend. Worth could come along, give his professional opinion. All three of us? All three of us. Robert looked around his living room, at Mary's photographs still on the walls, at the drawer upstairs that held Eleanor's jade bracelet. Change wasn't easy at their age, but neither was staying still when life offered a new direction. Well, he said finally, I suppose we should at least see if they allow cats. Eleanor's left dimple appeared. They do, I checked, multiple times. Worth purred louder, as if sealing the deal. Outside, autumn leaves danced past the window, showing how beautiful it could be to let go, to drift toward something new. The Cedar Grove Gardens unit had been move-in, ready for 2 weeks, before Robert and Eleanor finally began packing their separate lives into boxes. They'd agreed to take it slowly, one room at a time, each decision made with careful consideration. Worth supervised from atop various boxes, seemingly fascinated by the process of his humans consolidating their lives. Today, he perched on a carton marked Robert Books, Poetry, watching Eleanor sort through Robert's teaching mementos. Look at this, she said, pulling a faded paper from a folder. You kept my final essay from Peterson's class? Robert paused. In his careful wrapping of Mary's china. Top marks, as I recall. Your analysis of Kitten Abbey was particularly insightful. Such a romantic poem for a literature assignment. Eleanor smiled, touching the red A+ in the corner. I wrote every word thinking of you. I know. Why do you think you got the A? They shared a laugh, the sound echoing differently in the half-packed room. Worth jumped down to investigate a box Eleanor had brought over, marked Memories 2. Sort. Careful with that one, Eleanor warned, but the kitten had already knocked it sideways, spilling photographs across the floor. Among them, a familiar jade bracelet rolled out. I wondered where you kept it, Eleanor said softly. Robert picked up the bracelet. Top drawer all these years. Mary knew about it, said some memories deserved their own space. James knew too, about the letters we never sent. Eleanor gathered the scattered photos. He's the one who suggested I keep them, said they were part of who I was. They worked in silence for a moment, sorting through the physical remnants of parallel lives. Worth batted at a ribbon that had come loose from a photo album. It feels strange, Robert admitted, packing up 2 lives to make room for a third. Having second thoughts? No. He touched a box marked Mary Kitchen, just aware of everything changing. Again, Eleanor understood. Her own boxes contained James's medical records, organized with a doctor's precision. Their past loves weren't being erased, just reorganized, like books being shifted on a shelf to make room for new volumes. Sarah asked if we wanted to sage the new place, Eleanor said, trying to lighten the mood. Apparently it's trendy now, cleansing spaces of old energy. And what did Dr. Chen prescribe for emotional cleansing? Time. Patience. She reached for another box, this one marked Eleanor, vet school, and maybe some help from a very determined kitten. Worth, as if hearing his cue, jumped into an empty box, claiming it as his new bed. The label read, Shared New Memories. He's subtle, isn't he? Robert laughed. They continued packing, each box a decision about what to keep, what to let go, what to combine. Mary's favorite reading chair would go in their new shared office. James's medical journals would join Robert's poetry collections on custom-built shelves. The boys want to hire movers, Eleanor mentioned, carefully wrapping a framed photo of her veterinary school graduation. They're worried about us lifting things. Sarah, too. She's already programmed the new medical alert system they insisted on installing. We're lucky, Eleanor said softly. Having them care so much. Robert nodded, then paused as he pulled something from behind Mary's chair. A dried flower, pressed flat and forgotten. Speaking of caring, remember this? Eleanor took the flower, gently. From Thompson Park? The day we first read Wordsworth together. He smiled at Worth, still lounging in his claimed box. Seems fitting our cat ended up with that name. They worked through the afternoon, their possessions, gradually shifting from separate lives into shared spaces. Each box told a story. Kitchen, mutual, living room, blend, memories combined. Near sunset, Sarah arrived with dinner, taking in the organized chaos with approval. Need any help? We're managing, Robert said, just as Eleanor added, Actually, yes. They shared a look, then laughed. Worth meowed his agreement from his box. Maybe with the books, Eleanor suggested. They're heavy, and someone's not supposed to strain himself. Doctor's orders, Robert sighed dramatically. Though I'm not sure which doctor I'm listening to anymore. My cardiologist or my favorite veterinarian. Both, Eleanor and Sarah said simultaneously. As they worked, the boxes slowly transformed from symbols of separate pasts into promises of a shared future. Worth moved from box to box, as if testing each one for its napping potential, unconcerned, with labels or categories. You know, Sarah said, carefully packing Robert's poetry books alongside Eleanor's veterinary journals, some people might think this is crazy, moving in together at your age, starting over. Good thing we have an excellent medical team to monitor our mental health, Robert replied, winking at Eleanor. And a very qualified emotional support cat, Eleanor added, watching Worth claim. Another box. Outside, the moving truck was scheduled for tomorrow, but tonight, surrounded by boxes holding both past and future, they were already home. The Cedar Grove Gazette had certainly changed since 1973. The paper was thinner now, more focused on local events than world news. But there, on the front page of the lifestyle section, was a headline that made Robert nearly spill his morning. Coffee, love rekindled after 50 years. Local veterinarian and former teacher find second chance through rescue kitten. The article sat between announcements for the fall festival and updates on road construction, complete with a photo of Robert, Eleanor and Worth on their new patio at Cedar Grove Gardens. Eleanor was still in her veterinary coat, having just returned from the clinic. Robert held Worth, who appeared to be batting at Eleanor's reading glasses chain. I'm going to kill Sarah, Eleanor said when she saw it, but her left dimple gave away her amusement. She promised she was just writing a small piece about senior pet adoption. Your daughter, Robert reminded her, is a journalist, even if she mostly covers city council meetings now. The article was thoughtfully written, focusing on the theme of community and connection rather than just romance. Sarah had interviewed their neighbors, both old and new, creating a portrait of how love stories didn't have to end with retirement. Mrs. Chen's cat always knows when someone needs comfort, reported their new neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who ran the community center. And Mr. Maxwell reads poetry in the garden. It's better than those television shows my grandchildren watch. The Bell Tower Cafe got a mention, with the current owner, grandson of the original proprietor, commenting on how some couples just belonged in Cedar Grove's history. They still split a slice of cherry pie, he noted. Some things never change. Worth naturally emerged as the story's hero. Sarah had detailed his rescue, his role in bringing Robert and Eleanor together, and his apparent mission to ensure his humans stayed healthy and happy. "I've never seen a cat so invested in physical therapy," said Jenny from the veterinary clinic. "He supervises their morning walks in Thompson Park, making sure they don't overdo it." The phone started ringing. Early that morning, first Thomas and Daniel alternately teasing and congratulating, then Robert's former students, many still in Cedar Grove. Eleanor's clients called the clinic, asking to see photos of Worth. "Did you see?" Sarah Chen from next door hurried over, still in her nurse's scrubs. "They're calling it the feel-good. Story of the year. They're calling it meddling," Eleanor corrected, but she was smiling. Very professional meddling, but still. The article had captured something beyond their personal story. It spoke to hope, to the possibility that life could surprise you at any age. Other residents of Cedar Grove Gardens began stopping by, sharing their own stories of late life changes and unexpected joy. "My Harold found me when we were both 70. Said Mrs. Peterson from Unit 12. "Been dancing ever since." "It's inspiring," added Mr. Collins, who taught art classes at the community center. "Makes you think about all the connections we miss, the chances we don't take." By afternoon, the story had reached the local news website. Comments poured in from former students, clients, and community members. "Dr. Chen saved my dog's life last year. She deserves all the happiness." Mr. Maxwell was my English teacher in '85. Still remember his Wordsworth lectures. "That kitten is the real matchmaker of Cedar Grove." Worth seemed to understand he was the topic of conversation, preening on his favorite windowsill as visitors stopped to admire him. The rescue shelter called, reporting an uptick in senior pet adoptions. "You've started a trend," Sarah said, showing them the online statistics. "Senior pets for senior citizens. The shelter's calling it the Worth Initiative." Eleanor and Robert shared a look over their morning coffee. The article lay between them, their story printed in black and white for all to see. But the real story, they knew, was in the quiet. Moments, Worth's purring during their morning exercises, shared looks over poetry books, gentle reminders about medications. "Well," Robert said finally, "I suppose if we had to become local celebrities, at least it's for something worthwhile." "The shelter thinks so," Eleanor agreed, "though I suspect Worth's ego might need its own therapy session." The kitten in question stretched luxuriously, then padded over to supervise their medication schedule, another detail Sarah had somehow worked into the article. Outside their patio, cedar trees swayed in the autumn breeze. The newspaper rustled, slightly, its pages carrying their story out into the world. But the real story they knew was still being written, one day at a time, with a very determined kitten, making sure every chapter unfolded exactly as it should. Thanksgiving arrived with the scent of fallen leaves and possibility. Their new kitchen at Cedar Grove Gardens filled with competing aromas, Eleanor's traditional Chinese recipes mingling with Robert's classic American dishes. On the counter, 2 family recipe books lay open, one bound in faded red leather with Chen family recipes, the other a collection of index cards in Mary's careful handwriting. "Mom, the dumplings go on the left," Sarah directed, orchestrating the dinner setup. "Dad's stuffing on the right. We're creating a cultural fusion here." Worth supervised from his new perch atop the refrigerator, occasionally offering commentary on the proceedings. The kitchen had become his favorite room, perhaps because it offered the best vantage point for monitoring his humans' eating habits. "Mary always put cranberry sauce in this bowl," Robert said, holding up a cut glass dish. "It was her mother's. And these plates were my grandmother's," Eleanor added, unwrapping delicate blue and white porcelain. "James's mother nearly fainted when I used them for everyday meals." Thomas and Daniel arrived with their families, adding to the cheerful chaos. Eleanor's granddaughters immediately gravitated to Worth, who accepted their attention with regal dignity. "Grandfather," 6-year-old Lily asked Robert, the title still new and wonderful on her tongue. "Can Worth have turkey?" "Ask your grandmother," Robert replied with a wink. "She's the doctor in the family." Eleanor looked up from where she was teaching Sarah the proper dumpling folding technique. "A small piece, no skin. Doctor's orders. For Worth or for Dad?" Thomas teased, earning a gentle swat from his mother with a paper towel. The recipe. Books provided structure to their merging traditions. Eleanor showed Robert's granddaughter Amy how to measure rice the traditional way, while Robert taught Daniel the secret to his mother's cornbread stuffing. "Two recipes, same message," Sarah observed, watching her parents work side by side. "Food equals love." Worth meowed in apparent agreement, drawing everyone's attention to the timer Eleanor had almost forgotten. She rescued the dumplings just in time, their edges perfectly crisp. "Mary would have loved this," Robert said softly, watching Eleanor arrange the dumplings on his late wife's serving platter. "She always wanted more family around the table." "James, too," Eleanor replied, squeezing his hand. "He used to say good food makes family out of friends." The grandchildren set the table, carefully placing name cards they decorated themselves. Worth's card, naturally, occupied a place of honor between Robert and Eleanor. "Should we say Grace?" Thomas asked as everyone settled into their seats. "Actually," Robert began, pulling out his reading glasses, "I thought we might try something different. In our poetry classes, we used to read a harvest blessing." "Dad," Sarah interrupted gently, "maybe we could combine traditions. A prayer, then your poem." Eleanor's left dimple appeared. "And perhaps a Chinese blessing for good measure. After all, we're writing our own recipe here." The family joined hands around the table, 3 generations connected by love and circumstance. Worth watched from his special cushioned chair, whiskers twitching at the aromas of both familiar and new dishes. "This feels right," Daniel said after the blessings. "Different, but right." The meal became a dance of discovery. Eleanor's grandchildren delighted in Robert's sweet potato casserole, while Sarah proudly served her first attempt at Chinese sticky rice. The recipe books lay open nearby, their pages recording not just ingredients, but stories, memories, and now new chapters. "Remember that first dinner at Bell Tower?" Robert asked Eleanor as they watched their blended family interact. "When you said some things were perfect just as they are." "I do," she smiled. "I also remember saying some things need updating." "Like pie recipes?" "Robert Maxwell, if you've changed your mother's apple pie recipe—" "Never," he assured her. "But I thought maybe we could serve it alongside your red bean dessert, create our own tradition." Worth chose that moment to pad across the table, despite Eleanor's half-hearted scolding, and settle between their plates, as if adding his approval to the arrangement. Later, as the family moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, Sarah found the recipe book still open on the counter. Next to Mary's pie recipe, Eleanor had carefully written notes about Chinese 5-spice. Beside Eleanor's dumpling instructions, Robert had added suggestions for incorporating traditional stuffing herbs. "They're not changing the recipes," Sarah explained to Thomas when he noticed. "They're expanding them, making room for more love." Through the evening, Worth moved from lap to lap, ensuring every family member received proper attention. The recipe books remained in the kitchen, their pages now holding more than just instructions. They held the blueprint for a family being gently, joyfully reconstructed. As night fell, the grandchildren drowsy with turkey and love, Robert and Eleanor stood in their kitchen, washing dishes side by side. The recipe books waited to be put away, their pages marked with new notes, new memories, new possibilities. "Next year," Eleanor said, drying a plate from her grandmother's set, "we might need a bigger table." "Next year," Robert agreed, carefully, storing Mary's cranberry bowl. "We'll be experts at this fusion thing." Worth purred from his perch, watching his humans create their own recipe for happiness, one holiday at a time. 1 year to the day after the Pitbull incident, Robert and Eleanor walked through Thompson Park, Worth trotting between them on his leash, a compromise they'd reached after his third attempt to chase squirrels. The autumn air carried the same crispness, the same promise of change. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Eleanor said, her hand warm in Robert's as they followed their usual path. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday." "And sometimes," Robert added, "it feels like no time passed at all, like we're still those kids reading poetry under the oak trees." They reached their favorite bench, the one with the perfect view of both, the duck pond and the spot where Worth had entered their lives. The kitten, now a sleek adult cat, settled regally between them. "I have something for you," Robert said, reaching into his vest pocket where his father's watch usually resided. Instead, he withdrew a small velvet box. "I know we said no gifts, but—" Eleanor's eyes widened. "Robert!" He opened the box to reveal a jade bracelet, its green stone catching the morning light. Unlike the original from 50 years ago, this one was set in silver rather than gold, its design more contemporary while honoring the traditional style. "The old one represented a promise we couldn't keep," Robert said softly. This one knows we're not the same people we were then. We're better." Eleanor touched the bracelet gently. "It's beautiful, but you didn't have to." "Actually, I did," he smiled, "because this time I had help." On cue, Sarah appeared from behind the oak tree, camera ready. Thomas and Daniel emerged from opposite directions, each carrying bags from Bell Tower Cafe. Worth, clearly in on the surprise, sat up straighter. "You planned this," Eleanor accused, but her left dimple gave away her joy. "We all did," Sarah confirmed. "Even Worth helped pick the bracelet. He has very specific taste in jade." Eleanor laughed as Robert fastened the bracelet around her wrist. The stone was warm, as if it had absorbed all the sunlight of the past 50 years, waiting for this moment. "We have something for you too, Dad," Thomas said, opening the cafe bags to reveal cherry pie and Eleanor's favorite almond cookies. "A proper celebration needs proper refreshments." Daniel spread a blanket under the oak tree, the same spot where Robert and Eleanor had once shared poetry and dreams. "Story has it," he said with a grin, "this used to be quite the romantic spot for young lovers." "Still is," Robert replied, helping Eleanor sit on the blanket, "just with better medical supervision now." Worth arranged himself in the center of their circle, accepting gentle pets from everyone. He'd grown into his role as family facilitator, equally comfortable at veterinary clinic fundraisers and poetry readings at the community center. "I found something else," Sarah said, pulling out a folder. "While researching for the article's 1-year follow-up, inside was a photograph none of them had seen before, young Robert and Eleanor at a school dance, him in a slightly too large suit, her wearing the original jade bracelet. They were looking at each other exactly the way they did now, time having polished their love rather than diminished it. "Where did you find this?" Eleanor asked, touching the photo carefully. "School archives. They're digitizing everything now." Sarah smiled. "Some stories are too good not to preserve." The morning sun climbed higher as they shared pie and memories. Worth accepted small bites of crust, his veterinarian-approved portion. The new bracelet caught the light whenever Eleanor moved, sending green reflections dancing across the blanket. "You know what this means," Daniel said, scrolling through his phone. "The family group chat needs updating. Worth's humans, year. Incomplete." "Don't you dare," Eleanor warned, but she was already reaching for her own phone. "Although, we should document this properly." Robert watched her snap a photo of the bracelet, then one of Worth examining it with feline intensity. "For medical records," he teased. "For us," she replied softly. for remembering that some things are worth waiting for. Sarah caught that moment with her camera, her parents sitting under the oak tree, Worth between them, the new bracelet, gleaming like a promise kept. Behind them, the park stretched out in its autumn glory, the same view that had witnessed their first love, now blessing their second chance. Next year, Thomas suggested, we should make this official. An annual family celebration. Worth's reunion day, Daniel added, or maybe second chance Sunday. Eleanor leaned against Robert's shoulder, their hands clasped, the jade bracelet cool against both their wrists. How about we just call it love, she said, plain and simple no matter how long it takes. Worth purred his approval, and all around them Cedar Grove continued its gentle dance of seasons and second chances. Spring came to Thompson Park in a burst of cherry blossoms and new beginnings. The morning sun caught the fresh bronze of a small plaque on a newly installed bench, where second chances begin, dedicated to the spirit of Cedar Grove, where love stories find their time. Robert and Eleanor sat on their bench, for it would always be theirs now, thanks to the community's insistence on honoring the story that had inspired so many. Worth lounged between them, his silver fur gleaming, the tiny scar above his eye, barely visible now. The shelter called yesterday, Eleanor said, adjusting her jade bracelet. 3 more senior cats adopted this month. The Worth Initiative is officially their most successful program. And how many of those adoptions involved? Reuniting long-lost loves? Robert teased. Just the one. But that's enough, don't you think? Worth stretched and moved to Eleanor's lap, careful not to disturb the small album she held. Inside were photographs spanning 50 years, their high school days, their separate lives, and now their shared future. The final page showed their blended family at last Thanksgiving, Worth prominently featured in the center. Sarah's editor wants to do another follow-up, Robert mentioned. Something about love being timeless. Well, she's not wrong. Eleanor's left dimple appeared, though I suspect Worth is the real star thereafter. As if acknowledging his fame, Worth sat up straighter, watching a young couple walk past. The woman paused to read the plaque, then smiled at her companion. They moved on, hands linked, adding their own story to the park's collection of moments. Do you ever wonder, Robert asked, his father's watch marking steady time in his pocket, what would have happened if Worth hadn't needed rescuing that day? Eleanor considered this, her doctor's pragmatism balanced by a poet's heart. I think love has its own timing. Worth just helped us keep the appointment. The morning light strengthened, warming the bench's bronze plaque. Around them, Thompson Park awakened. Joggers on their morning routes, children heading to school, life moving in its eternal cycles of renewal. The boys want to plant a cedar tree here, Eleanor said. Something about ensuring future generations have shade for their own love stories. Very subtle, our children. About as subtle as a cat who keeps accidentally locking us out on the patio together. Worth's innocent expression fooled neither of them. He'd grown quite skilled at creating moments for his humans, though his matchmaking services were no longer needed. Robert touched the plaque gently, feeling the warmth of sun-heated metal. You know what this means? We're officially part of Cedar Grove's history now. Just a small part, Eleanor smiled. A footnote about second chances and determined cats, and love that knows how to wait. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the park fill with morning light. The bench would remain here long after them, offering rest to tired feet and hope to waiting hearts. Worth supervised his domain, secure in the knowledge that his humans had finally learned the art of perfect timing. Ready for our walk? Robert asked eventually. Sarah will scold us if we miss our morning exercise. Eleanor stood, her jade bracelet catching the light. Lead the way, Mr. Maxwell. We have time. Worth took up his position between them as they walked their familiar path, past the spot where a frightened kitten had once needed rescue. Above them, cedar trees swayed in the spring breeze, their ancient branches witnessing yet another chapter in the endless story of love finding its way home. The plaque gleamed behind them, not an ending but a continuation, reminding all who passed that some stories take 50 years to write, some paths take a lifetime to walk, and some hearts just need a clever cat to show them the way back to where they belong.